So the first thing I want to say is just welcome on behalf of Women in Digital Switzerland to our first event in the Innovation Series. So Heidi is a renowned expert in collaboration, and we have the privilege of having her here with us. Our discussion will be led by Vasu Briquez. She is a seasoned international executive in enterprise software and the IT industry. She also has extensive, more recent experience in um, cross-sector initiatives in innovation, strategy, and digital transformation. Did you know that 97% of employees and executives believe that a lack of collaboration is really at root of some of the negative impacts and outcomes of a project? Yet a study, even a Stanford study, found that those who work in a collaborative rather than an individual setting are 50% more effective. So having a good understanding of your collaborative tendencies is crucial to success, especially in times of uncertainty. And that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. So, our innovation series events are moderated by innovation experts like Vasu. And as a result, you as the audience have a deeper understanding of the speaker's messages through the lens of an expert asking those right questions. So before we start our event, I wanted to share with you a little bit more information about Women in Digital Switzerland. Our mission is to be a recognized change agent for diversity and inclusion in digital leadership across Switzerland. So we are advancing careers at the intersection of business transformation, entrepreneurship, innovation, and marketing. So we have a community of over 600, and we've hosted over 300 events since 2014. And we're proud that we've now expanded to have a presence in over 8 cities. So online, we offer a digital community where you can meet with and have chats on the online forum. You can look at member profiles, and you can have discounts on exclusive events. There are also some additional benefits. We have a mentoring program, and we have some additional resources that are available to you through additional partnerships that we have. So since we are a community led and run by the community, we rely on support. So if you take a moment, if you are in a position to donate, please feel free to click on this link and support our cause. And if you're not able to support, you're always welcome to join us as a volunteer. We have over 25 volunteers who are working on different meaningful projects. We like to learn more about you, so we also encourage you to take our survey. You can follow the link now and share with us a little bit more about your interests, or I will drop this in the chat so you can share with us a little bit more information later. So what's coming up for us? We have the Innovation Success with AI and Tech Workshop. This will be in Geneva on May 25th. We will also broadcast virtually. We also have a digital transformation session in the biopharma industry. We are accepting applications for our Work in Tech program, where you have access to Coursera and Google certification programs. So we're accepting those enrollments and applications until the end of the May. Thank you, and without further ado, I'd like to invite you, Vasu, to lead us into the session.
Good evening to everyone, and welcome to our event. And I was just going to say I'm delighted to introduce to you and welcome Dr. Heidi K. Gardner, a distinguished fellow at the Harvard Law School and previously a professor at the Harvard Business School and also a consultant at McKinsey & Co. Named as a next generation business guru, Dr. Gardner has authored more than 80 books, case studies, and articles. Her research has received the Academy of Management Prize for Outstanding Practical Implications for Management. She's a sought after advisor, keynote speaker, and a facilitator for organizations across a wide range of industries globally. Dr. Gardner is the author of the best-selling book, Smarter Collaboration: How Professionals and Their Firms Succeed by Breaking Down Silos. So we have the great pleasure of having her with us today to explore this topic and to enlighten us on smarter collaboration in her own compelling way. Now, let me also introduce myself. I'm Vasu Brekans, and I'm your moderator for today's event, which is the first one in the innovation series, as Karan just mentioned. So before we start, let me just say a few words about myself and the topic of my own passion, collaborative innovation. I have a long career of over 42 years in the enterprise software and IT industry, focusing on innovation, new technologies, and new technology-led businesses. I have worked for and with many multinationals in several different countries in Europe, in the US, Asia. I was, in fact, the vice president of innovation at Oracle for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for a number of years. And when I was heading up innovation there, one of the key things I did was to build what we called the innovation network across all countries in EMEA. I remember I used to say, no, I don't need a big central group. No more staff. But I do need innovation leaders, champions, and other passionate advocates and knowledgeable people from all different countries coming together in a very large innovation network to collaborate together, to co-create and co-innovate together. So we built, animated, nurtured, and fostered this network of collaboration, like this was a living entity, as the essential means to grow and sustain innovation. And in fact, sustain especially our capacity to innovate continuously. And then later, when I was working as a senior advisor for open innovation for a European Commission organization, it was again all about boosting collaborative innovation amongst many different players in Europe. Startups, many startups, small and medium enterprises, corporates, innovation centers, incubation centers, academia, research institutions, etc., you name it, right? Giving rise to all sorts of different kinds of oh so interesting partnerships. So as you can see, I'm a total believer that collaboration is essential and crucial for innovation. And I'm really excited to be listening to Dr. Gardner today. So Heidi, Dr. Gardner, can you get us started a little bit on smarter collaboration, just to explain what it is and especially explain how is it different from just all of us working together?
Absolutely. I will be delighted to. And what I want to do is let's role model some of that kind of smarter collaboration ourselves. We've got a link in the chat right now. We would encourage you to either copy and paste that into your browser, or right now, scan the QR code. I trust you can actually see what I'm looking at here right now. So you've got a QR code up on screen. And what we're asking you to do is either through the QR code or through that link that's in the chat, go in and answer. It's a handful of questions about yourself. The findings will remain anonymous, but we are going to use them later in our session today so that we can customize and make sure that we are giving you the best possible responses here. I'm hearing a couple of people are having chatting in that they're having problems with the link. Try the QR code. I think my team here is on the line with me. They're letting me know that there are some results coming in. So ask you to give it another go. Here's what we are going to do. We're going to be talking about smarter and smart collaboration. The question, Vasu, was, how is this different than your just run-of-the-mill teaming? Well, the idea here with smarter collaboration is that it is a business imperative. It arises from two trends, and I would imagine that all of our participants today are familiar with this first one: specialized expertise. You know, the idea is that knowledge is changing so fast that in order for you to be known as an expert, you've got to put some clear boundaries about what are the topics that are most important for me to stay on top of, and then go deep, deep, deep in those topics. And that is perfectly functional. It's important for all of us to be able to do, to create our own brand and become these experts. But at the same time, our problems are anything but narrow and clearly defined, right? And so what that means is we need experts who are highly specialized, who have gone deep in their areas to join forces. Vasu, just like you were talking about when you were working on innovation in these other organizations, you were really thoughtful about whom do you need to bring into your network and when do you need to collaborate with them in order to get these business outcomes. So the important thing to think about is that smarter collaboration is a highly intentional, deliberate way of thinking about the end result that we want, whether it's innovation, breakthrough ideas and products and services. Is it efficiency and cost effectiveness? Is it better client service processes? Whatever it is we're trying to achieve, we want to dial that back and unpack it and say, whose expertise, whose unique life experiences or points of view or cultural background will help us achieve that better than any of us could do on their own. That's what we're talking about here.
Great. Now, what you say rings so true, Heidi. As you explained in your book, smarter collaboration boosts innovation and adoption in a big way. So would you like to share with us some of the empirical research findings that you have, as well as your own personal insights on this? And maybe you can also share with us some of the cultural enablers for this.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, here's an example. We were using a case study in our book from one of the big life sciences companies. And they talked about how they engaged in smarter collaboration by getting the right people involved from the beginning, working together and accelerating everything. And I highlight here this idea of the right people at the beginning. So often what we find is that we embark on these, important projects and we make one of two kinds of mistakes. Either we get too narrow of a group. We kind of bring in the usual suspects, Vasu, like, oh, this is life sciences. We need somebody from this molecule, somebody from regulatory and what. And you become a little bit like tunnel vision. You only bring in the exact same people again and again. Or you do the opposite and you say, hang on, this is a big, broad problem. This is a question about how is, artificial intelligence and chat GPT going to change our workflows? And suddenly you have people from all over the place coming together and you have a mob there and you can't engage with each other constructively and effectively. So we're getting the right people involved from the very beginning. And here's what happened in this life sciences company that we profile. We eliminated artificial organizational boundaries. We stripped out the bureaucracy, removed all the siloed approval processes. So rather than having things go from here and then thrown over the wall to here, and what they were able to do is get that cross section of people involved right from the beginning. Who are decision makers? Whose voice is important here? What kinds of stakeholder perspectives do we need? And that's how they accelerated it. And by the end, they had reduced the time for drug approvals by 50%. Now, the reason this hits me so hard is, yes, of course, we're helping, big companies become better at what their core business is. But think of it from the other side. You've got children or people out there who received their life-saving medicine years in advance, right? And that's the kind of thing that we can accomplish when we are teaming up with smarter collaboration in mind. Exactly whom do we need, when, and how do we work together? And you mentioned, Vasu, the empirical side of this. So it's not just anecdotes that we rely on. We've got millions and millions of data records from organizations all around the globe. And this is publicly available data. It happens to be US patent data, and it looks very, very similar patent data around the world. What it shows here is in any given year from the 1970s until quite recently, the proportion of patents that were granted based on the number of inventors. So that big blue blob at the bottom, you see all the way on the left in the mid 70s, nearly 60% of patents that were granted went to solo inventors. But that proportion has decreased by half in the ensuing decades, while at the same time, 3-person patent teams have doubled and 7-person patent teams have exploded in importance, 9-fold increase. And so when you're thinking about innovation, how do we get breakthrough ideas? 2 takeaways from this slide. Number 1, innovation is more of a team sport than ever, right? You absolutely, if you're tackling these complex, high value issues, you need to be bringing in almost inevitably more than one point of view or perspective. And what you need to be thinking carefully about is what kinds of brains, what kinds of experiences, what kinds of points of view are going to enlarge your solution space and give you value add over and above simply adding another person to the team. It's adding exactly the right kind of person to the team that makes such an enormous difference when it comes to innovation.
Oh, that's so insightful. Thanks, Heidi. Okay, so next point is you make the point very eloquently in your book that smarter collaboration is a significant driver, of course, innovation, as we just mentioned, but also revenue and profits and customer loyalty and efficiency, risk reduction, various business benefits. And very importantly, you point out that smarter collaboration is a big enhancer of diversity and inclusion. So could you please elaborate on that and give us some practical examples that we can take inspiration from, and also point out maybe some key learnings that we should embrace?
Oh my goodness, I wish we had 3 hours on this topic. Yeah, I mean, we have been, passionately pursuing this idea of inclusion as part of our research on smarter collaboration. We talked about innovation just now. We've looked at issues around productivity and more strategic relationships, efficiency. Again, we have data on all of these. In the first chapter in our book, The Business Case for Collaboration really drives home how to think about quantifying the impact and the return on investment when you're gearing up in these smarter collaboration ways. There's lots of talent-related outcomes as well. For example, many people changed roles during COVID times, during lockdown, work from home, hybrid, all of these new ways of operating, and people joined organizations. And we need to make sure people are highly integrated and that there's two-way collaboration happening in order to get people as embedded in the culture and the work as possible. Our research and loads of other scholars shows that when you do that, it is a more inclusive environment because you're able to find for every new hire, what is it that they are brilliant at and how do you get them plugged in where they can play to their strengths? And this ability to attract, include, and retain talent is absolutely a critical piece. When you think about what we were just saying, innovation and DEI are closely intertwined, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You need a diverse group of minds, and it's not just enough. As all of us well know, it is not just enough to have a seat at the table. If we are in a strategic discussion, if we are in a problem-solving session, if we are at a board meeting, simply being there doesn't bring out the full force of what we could contribute. We need to be in a context where it is safe for us to contribute our unique perspectives, and we have to be valued when we do. Smarter collaboration isn't just about coalescing the right group at the right time. It is about creating the environment where everyone can play to their strengths. And here is what we find happens when we engage in this way. So again, I'm a nerd. I can't help it. I love data and analytics. But here we've used some of our mapping capabilities to draw out and visualize some of our data. So here's what we see. We have two nearly identical professionals. We found the two people in our massive data set who are so close to one another. We joke that they're twins. I don't think they actually share DNA, but they share a load of professional characteristics. They work for the same company. They have the same practice, which means they do the same kind of work in the same department. They have loads of other demographic characteristics that they share, including the fact that they're men. So I happen to call them he. But here, twin one, we've taken all of the data from the project management databases and things, and we have mapped out Twin One's collaboration pattern. Not sure if people know how to read one of these maps. Take a look. Every dot here is a senior level individual in the same company where the quote unquote twins work. And they're color coded by which department they're in. And the lines connecting them signify that they have worked together for a material amount of time in this given year. So they've worked together on a specific project or an initiative or a task force or something where they've come together in this smarter collaboration way to tackle a tough business problem. Now, twin one, he's the one who's circled. you can see he's got what, like 3 other people at senior levels that he's worked with this year on big problems. Take a look. Anybody see anything different about Twin Two's collaboration pattern? Right? I mean, clearly it's wildly different here. He's got lots more people that he's interacting with in the year. There are more colors. I'm not sure, it's teeny on my screen, but if you can see, there's lots more colors. So he's drawing on different kinds of experts from different groups and departments and possibly different jurisdictions around this company. And notice also that he is connected to people who are connected, right? And so what we looked at here was the business outcomes for Twin 1 versus Twin 2. When we are looking at some of the outcomes, like the growth of the products for ones that they are, responsible for, what was the growth? What was the profitability? What were some of the other financial metrics? How was customer satisfaction? And how were indicators of something like team health, retention, and engagement, and so forth? And what we see is that compared to Twin 1, Twin 2 is a 4 times higher performer. And so when we're starting to talk about these how-tos, like what does it really take to get the most out of smarter collaboration, what we want to be thinking about is that it's not that bigger is better. It's that better is better, right? Let me say that again. Better is better. And Twin 2 has a better collaboration network. Twin 2 has a more diverse network. He's connected with people who themselves are well connected throughout this organization. And he's more strategic about how he uses his network. So Vaza, there might be people watching who don't know how to read one of these maps in quite such a nuanced way. Do you notice that he's over on the side and he's got some dots that are really close to him and then some that are way across the map? Here's what that means. The way we geared this algorithm is that we asked the computer to pull the dots closer together. In other words, bring people in the diagram closer together the more different projects they worked on in a given year. And so Twin 2 has some of the people who are really close to him. They probably worked together many, many times throughout the course of the year. And he has people who are like way far away. That is an indication, because he's got these different lengths, that he's really strategic. He brings in the right people for the right reasons at the right time. And so we really want people to think about this. If we were to map your collaboration network, right? If we were to draw your spider web, what would it look like? How many colors would it have? How diverse is it? Are you in the center of things? If so, maybe a risk that you're a bit of a bottleneck because everything has to come through you. Are you connected with connectors? Because the time, the speed matters. I think, Vaza, you mentioned this, like the ability to get to the right people quickly and make a difference. That matters. And if one of his, connections isn't the right person to answer a question or provide some kind of input, they probably know who is, right? It's that friend of a friend situation. And loads of research, since the mid-60s onward has shown that it's often what sociologists call weak ties. In other words, the friend of the friend, the colleague of the colleague, who are able to be so powerful in a collaboration sense because they have access to information and further contacts that are outside our realm. And the last thing I will say on this is, actually, I'll say 2 things. One is, if people are worried about this and they go, oh my gosh, I'm kind of an introvert. Like, I'm not the life of the party, wear a lampshade on my head kind of person. Am I still going to be able to be like Twin 2? And the answer is absolutely yes, because introverts have a superpower when it comes to creating and nurturing this sort of network. Now, if we were looking, I'll tell you in a minute what that superpower is, but if we were looking at how many people did you see on a weekend, or how many people did you socialize with at the party, then maybe you'd have more of an extrovert network like this. But introverts' superpower is listening and processing deeply. And so an introvert has the power to build out a network like this and use it very strategically and understand when to tap into whose experiences and whose expertise at exactly the most optimal moment. And so the first thing I wanted to say is, introverts, go for it. In your work networks, you have absolutely every reason to believe that you can be at least as powerful as Twin2 in building these networks. The other thing that I would like to say is, for a whole lot of empirical reasons that I won't get into, data availability and privacy reasons, et cetera, we only looked at people's internal networks. So what you're seeing here is how many people Twin1 or Twin2 collaborated with inside their own company. If we were to take this and blow it out to the ecosystem, how many people in, competitors, how many people in technology providers, how many people in the regulatory space, how many people in the universities was Twin2 interacting with? My strong hunch is it would be like, completely. And so again, challenging all of you to think about, when you're drawing your own site or web, what are the 1 or 2 actions you could take to enhance the quality of your network and how you use it? So I probably have gone on and on about this enough, Azu, but I think it's just such a vital piece of the collaboration space that we really want people to reflect on their own opportunities and then commit to taking some actions to build out those collaboration spaces.
Perfect. I mean, this is so very fascinating, Heidi. You're right. That's such an important slide. Yeah, maybe, but I know that although we scanned the QR code in the beginning, I know you're going to talk a little bit about the smart accelerator tool here, just, and the behavioral strengths. So could you give us some, insights into this?
Yes, absolutely. So, I think it's important to realize that people have lots of different kinds of opportunities. We were just saying introverts and extroverts, they're, they've got different ways of approaching the way they interact with people. They have different strengths that we can draw on. And those are the sort of obvious ones, right? For a lot of people, it's, how do I show up on a day-to-day basis? And what we'd like to draw people's attention to is that there is so many more kinds of diversity when it comes to approaching how people engage with their work. And many of them are invisible. So let me, as I share my screen again, what we're going to be seeing is a tool called the Smart Collaboration Accelerator. Let me just pull up what this report looks like. So for all of you who took part in the accelerator yourselves, you will have just gotten a taster of this accelerator tool. It's a psychometric tool. It only takes, for the whole thing, it only takes about 10 minutes to complete. And you get a profile that looks like this. You get these sort of dots that show you where on these 7 different dimensions your natural tendencies are. And then for each one of them, it tells you how to leverage that as a strength. If you are leading a collaborative effort, if you're participating in a team, how do you take your natural style and behaviors that come easiest to you and use that as a real way to foster and engage in smarter collaboration? And we help to highlight some of your blind spots. When is it that tendency of yours trips over into being dysfunctional? All right. So chapter 4 of our book gives a lot of the sort of use cases for this. Let me tell you one good thing about these profiles, in case you get a little edgy doing these, assessments. In this case, there's no wrong answer. Right? This, I'm showing you an example of, one individual's profile. This might even be mine now that I think about it. What we're showing here is a profile. It is not the ideal profile. Trust me, we interrogated the data. We have thousands and thousands of people who have taken this, and we have all kinds of other metrics and measures about them. And there's zero correlation between somebody's position in any one dimension on this profile or their whole sort of gestalt profile here. No links whatsoever to performance outcomes or collaborative capabilities. What matters is that people know where they stand. Let me give you a taste here. When people are able to play to their strengths, they can achieve more than anyone could do on their own. The risk dimension is the one where we were profiling this group, right? So those few questions you took, it should have given you, hopefully you still have it up on your screen, where you came out. Now, maybe, some people could be risk spotters. Risk spotters are the kind of people who look at a situation and what automatically springs to mind is the problems, the risks, the downside, the issues, because they're motivated to avoid failure and motivated to kind of not step in any holes, fall in any holes, right? Not have failures. The opposite is risk seekers. So risk seekers will look at that exact same situation, and it's not that they're foolhardy. They know that there are risks there, but somehow, we don't know exactly how personalities form, but for some reason, they look at that same situation and what pops into their mind is, hey, look at the upside. So risk seekers go to bed at night and go, a few things blew up today, but boy, we're out there on the bleeding edge. What an awesome day. And whereas risk spotters go, shoo, nothing blew up. Right? So which one were you? Does that sound like you? And one question we often get, Vasu, is that, okay, so is this dependent on the job I'm doing right now? And the answer is no. Somebody's risk profile is, it's pretty, I don't want to say hardwired. It can flex to some degree. But if somebody was a risk spotter kid, they probably wore their bicycle helmet. Right? If somebody was a risk seeker kid, they were riding the bike and they were standing on the seat, right? I mean, it's just like, people have this different propensity towards risk. Well, interestingly, in this group, we have a very low proportion of risk spotters. We have lots of balanced. We actually have, I think I must have typed this in wrong. I was trying to type and talk at the same time. We actually had 40% risk seekers. So the question here is, what are people going to do if they are in a group and they have a preponderance of people who are risk seekers? Like, what in the group, what would be your superpower and what would be your risk, right? What would be the downside of this? What we know is that for people who are in groups like this one, I think we've got the data showing up now properly. What we have is in a group like this with a preponderance of balanced or risk seekers, you're going to be blinded to this idea that maybe you need to take some cautions, right? So, I didn't say balanced. So balanced people doesn't mean you can't make up your mind. It means you're context dependent. Right? So I'd ask you to think about, if you were in the 60% of people who were balanced, what is it that triggers you to see the upside and to go for it? And what is it in a situation that triggers you to be thinking about, whoa, there's like a big problem there, time out, call it quits for the moment. Let's put a pause here. What is it, if you're balanced, that pushes you in one direction or the other? If you're in a group that has this proportion, the risk is that the risk seekers will dominate. And I will be honest, in a lot of corporate cultures, there is a reward for risk taking or acting like a risk seeker, right? You're out there on the edge, and the risk is, if the culture is like that, you will start to pull the balanced people in that direction. And another way to say that is, for the risk spotters in the room, they get overlooked or even actively shut out. So when we were working with the top very, very, very senior leaders of a big global company, it turns out that of the 35 top leaders, they were running the opcos, they were chief level officers, 33 of those 35 people were risk seekers. And I mean, when we put this data in front of them, it was really powerful. I mean, these were a lot of people who'd come up as engineers and things, so they liked seeing a science and math-driven way of understanding group dynamics. And so it was fascinating for them. They're like, whoa, like, all of us are risk seekers. Do you think that's why the regulators are crawling all over us? And do you think that's why we've had some big blow-ups in the product market? It's like, yes. And when one guy raises his hand and goes, yeah, I will out myself, I'm one of the risk spotters, everyone goes, yeah, we hate talking to you. You throw cold water on all our good ideas. And he's like, yeah, you never effing listen to me. And people are like, oh, yeah, maybe we should have created some space for you to speak up, or, when you did, to actually value what you had to say. And I'm bringing this in as an example of inclusivity, or the opposite, right? We need to create space in problem-solving discussions, in brainstorms, in our working environment, where when somebody says something that kind of irritates us, oh, they're throwing cold water on my good idea, or they're asking for all these details and I want to stay big picture, or they're way too high level and I want to get into how it works. When we get irritated by somebody like that, rather than kind of moving on or sidelining them, let's take a pause and say, wait a minute, what do they know that I don't? And how do I create space for somebody who thinks about this really differently? It's hard to do that, right? When we're under pressure, we tend to get tunnel vision. So we only go to the more obvious solutions, right? And the obvious solutions are the ones that come naturally to us. And it's hard when we're under pressure to create that inclusive environment and really embrace people who are coming at the problem, directly opposite from us. And what I'm, suggesting here is all of our research over 15 plus years at Harvard, and even before that, shows that when people find ways to embrace that diversity and genuinely use it, that they get those significantly better outcomes. And that's what we're after.
Fantastic, fantastic. No, I mean, I love the way you've taken, you've told us how to take our behavioral tendencies and make these strengths, and come out and go for it, Great. Now I come to a crux point where, again, you say that engaging in smarter collaboration delivers real benefits to individuals, like all of us here, each of us here. So one of these is a sense of purpose and meaning. So maybe can you explain a little bit more about that and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to use an example here from the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. I'm not sure, I hope a lot of people here haven't had direct experience with the Dana-Farber. It's one of the world's leading institutions for both research and treatment of cancer. And, here's the example that really sticks with me. I was asked by the chief scientific officer to get involved with the Dana-Farber on a pro bono basis to help them understand how they were going to get these incredibly brilliant scientists to come together and work, under the same roof, in the same lab, applying for the same, grants, et cetera, across disciplines, because fighting this beast of cancer no longer requires just people who are specialists in cancer, but people who are geneticists and, and mathematicians and, we need a whole raft, like with other diseases, a whole raft of different kinds of deep specialists coming together. And this was some years ago when there was some big transitions happening in the medical field. And I had the opportunity to work at the Dana-Farber on some research and to help them in their programs. And my first day driving up there, it's a big set of buildings here in the Boston area where I live. And I was driving up and I didn't know where to go. Some guy motions me over, and turns out he's the valet. He shows me, like where to, takes my keys, gives me the ticket. And when I'm done with the whole day of interviews and data gathering and things, I come down and I drop my ticket off at the desk. And by the time I get into the underground parking garage, my car's waiting for me there. I was like, wow, that worked really well. And then it happened again and again and again. And I was looking around, like as a PhD in organizational behavior, I kind of think that I have the opportunity to snoop around in everyone else's business and ask questions and things. So I was looking for the cameras to see if these, valet parking attendants were being monitored. I tried to tip them. They didn't take any money. So, like it wasn't financial incentives. It wasn't the big boss watching them. I was like, finally, I just asked them straight up, like, you are the best parking attendants I've ever experienced. Like, why are you so motivated to do this job? And I will never forget what one of them said to me. He said, everyone who comes to the Dana-Farber, he said, they either have cancer or they're visiting a loved one with cancer. He said, the last thing they should have to worry about is parking their car. I was like, oh my God, like this is a guy who's so low on the organizational hierarchy. I'm pretty sure he doesn't even make it on the org charts, right? And yet he was so clearly empowered to do what he could do to make somebody's journey as human as possible. And it was such an important wake up call for me that I go back to mentally time and again. When we're thinking about, oh, who do I need to add to my collaboration network and who's the biggest brain in my field? And I also want people to be thinking about this entire web of experiences that we create through collaboration. Somebody at the Dana-Farber was smart enough to know that they needed these parking attendants as part of smarter collaboration, because the whole, patient experience or visitor experience hinged sometimes on really little things, and figuring out in a very expansive way, how do we get everyone who touches this important outcome, in this case, patient experience, how do we get everyone who touches it geared up to understand the role that they play? And how do they draw on their strengths in order to play that role to the utmost? So, as we're thinking about this idea of a strong sense of meaning and purpose, how does smarter collaboration boost the feelings of purpose, and what else needs to happen? I'd encourage everyone here to be thinking about that in your own organization. How is it that you have conversations with people so they don't just understand the corporate objective? Because sometimes that feels really far removed. But how do you get people to think about the role that they play as, an interim kind of building block along that? One of the secrets I will tell you is that the closer you can get people to end users, right? I mean, these parking attendants, they had the visceral experience of people pulling into the parking garage or picking up their cars, either with joy on their faces or tears on their cheeks, right? They had the visceral experience of interacting with the user who benefited from their inputs. That's much harder to do in certain environments, but it's not impossible. And so I challenge everyone here today to be thinking about, how do you help people make that connection? How do you help them think about the role that they play? If they're a compliance lawyer, why is it that having, compliance with these regulations is going to, ultimately save lives or save the environment or do something really important? They're not just doing their job. They're doing their job for part of a bigger reason. And, whatever role somebody has, helping them think about how that technology benefits a person, an environment, the planet, you name it. I think it takes creativity sometimes, and yet the payouts are absolutely enormous. So it's part of leadership, but I'm afraid that at times it becomes a bit too removed and too hard to do. And when we are there, like driving towards results, we might need a reminder sometimes.
Absolutely. That's such a great takeaway. Absolutely. So now we have several women leaders here, both entrepreneurs heading up their own companies and also women who are heading up different groups in their own organizations, right? So how can these leaders figure out what are the barriers to collaboration in their groups? What are the tools or methods that they can use, that you talk about in your book, that in order to break down silos and create an environment where collaboration can thrive?
Yes, absolutely, Vasu. So let me let you in on a little dark secret here around spotting those barriers. What we have found in our research is the more senior somebody is, the less in tune they are with what barriers actually exist. And so, think about how that happens. Somebody who's really senior in an organization, they have power. So a lot of people hesitate to say no to them. Now, I know there's probably some very senior people there going, oh my gosh, people say no to me all the time. Okay, well then think about how it is for the junior person, right? For somebody who doesn't have access to resources. I think there's also like Twin 2, people who have really worked to build out their collaboration networks and patterns, probably over extended periods of time. They have access to information that other people don't. They have resources, they have influence, et cetera. And so it's hard for people who are very senior, very powerful to know what these barriers are. there is a toolkit that we have developed, and our publisher, Harvard Business Press, has published this as a companion to the book itself, because we have been working. I have to be careful. So I'm at Harvard University, as you said in the very beginning, but I work privately outside of Harvard. I run a consulting and advisory business called Gardner and Co. And through Gardner and Co., we have developed this toolkit. I need to be careful, because if I indicated that it was a Harvard-backed tool, it could be problematic. So this is the independent work. Like, let me just, try not to get fired today. We've developed this toolkit because we worked with dozens and dozens of organizations of all different shapes and sizes and challenges. And we created this very data-driven way of understanding what these challenges are. Right? And what we find is that there are 6, 7, 8 very common barriers to collaboration across organizations. But what's different is the prevalence of any of those barriers. So let me give a specific example. In some organizations, the lack of trust between people just slams the door on the opportunities for collaboration. And what we found in our research is there's actually 2 kinds of trust that really matter. One is competence trust. If you're going to bring me in to work on this important project, et cetera, you better be absolutely confident that I know what I'm talking about, right? And for those of you who are thinking about this, if you're new in an organization, how do you send loud, clear signals of your trustworthiness? Because you're going to be scrambling around trying to figure out whom you can trust, but flip the mirror around and say, how do people know that they can trust me? So, delivering those signals that you really know what you're talking about, making sure you've got an elevator pitch. I don't mean pitching to customers or, vendors or anything. I mean, I'm talking about the internal pitch. How do you describe what you're brilliant at in 20 seconds so that when you join a Zoom meeting, you can talk about who you are and what you do, and people go, I'm going to have to call her for the next time that comes up, right? So the lack of trust in some organizations is a huge barrier. Getting people to think about how they exude signals of trustworthiness is crucial. But you might think I'm the biggest guru in the world, but if you think I'm a jerk, you're still not going to collaborate with me, right? You have to believe in my character. You have to believe in my integrity. And that's the interpersonal trust is another dynamic. Are you convinced that if we work together, I'm not going to steal your ideas and pretend they were mine? That interpersonal trust is absolutely vital. And so, we've designed this process for people to use if they're launching one of these diagnostics in their own organization. How do they collect the data that will help them figure out which of these barriers? Maybe it's not a trust issue at all. Maybe it is, maybe it is the lack of time that people have because the compensation system asks them to work in highly individualistic ways. And so they feel like they're better off being, sharp elbowed and keeping people out of their turf. Maybe it's, merely I'm new to the organization. I don't know who does what or what our capabilities are. There are so many of these barriers, and thinking about which of those barriers emerge are really crucial. So, it could be competence trust or interpersonal trust. Knowing the organizational capabilities, knowing whom to call, establishing one's own reputation. Those are the kinds of things that we have codified, these methods for digging in and seeing which of these barriers make the biggest difference in your organization. And so we'd encourage people to check that out. Maybe we can send a link out to people, or we'll give people the slides afterward, and they can see the link in there if they want to get a hold of this toolkit so they can use it themselves and really dig into those barriers.
Perfect. Okay. So, anything before we go into the Q&A session, which is about now, anything, some final thoughts? Do you want to, put up some final slide or final thought, or shall we just jump into the Q&A?
Let me give you the really quick how-tos, because I really like to leave people with an extremely clear sense of some quick tips that they could do. One is to go where the energy is. If you're starting off trying to embed collaboration, there will be people who genuinely have a lot of energy around this. They've seen why smarter collaboration is really crucial. And keeping those enthusiasts in the loop and seeking their advice, getting them to participate in anything you're embarking one is really helpful. And then finding and recruiting the influencers, people who are known for speaking the truth, people who may not have positions of power, but do have a lot of respect in the organization, and make sure you're engaging with them and understanding where they believe smarter collaboration could make a big difference and what they think could stand in the way. Creating a shared language. That's one of the biggest benefits of using that psychometric tool, the Smart Collaboration Accelerator, is it helps people get really specific about where the friction comes in and how we use it to our advantage. It takes big, fuzzy, abstract things like interpersonal relations and boils it down to the fact that you really like to think at the 30,000 foot level, big picture, and I like to be in the weeds making an action plan. If we can bottom out where some of our differences are, it can help them use them most effectively. And then getting people to think about piloting new approaches, figuring out what's absolutely feasible and not necessarily going for the biggest prize first, but to think about what's feasible, how do we get traction, how do we get some momentum and show that we are on the right path. Those are some of the tips that we have.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So over to the audience now, or if there's one question in the chat, I think from you, Karen, we can just take that right now. But in the meantime, I'm just, giving a call to the audience here. If you have any questions, this is the moment, raise your hand or just put the question in the chat, okay? So Karen, maybe you can voice your question.
So thank you, Heidi. Great presentation, lots of insights, a lot that can be applicable to completely different work settings. In terms of the most barriers to collaboration, besides some of the issues around trust, what are those barriers that you're seeing most often?
Yeah, I think we can look at those barriers from top down and bottom up. In the sense of top down, there's often some structural or system problems that stand in the way. For example, in the life sciences company, they had a whole process they needed to follow with these stage gated approvals. And they really need to be thinking about how do we take that kind of very formal process, which keeps people in their silos, and blow it up in a way that you can cut across silos. So starting from the top down, is it a structural issue? Is it a systemic issue? Is it the compensation system or performance management more broadly? And we tackle performance management actually is a really huge issue in a lot of organizations. So we tackle that, especially in the book with a whole chapter called out there. I would say on the bottom up side, figuring out whether people actually have the capabilities that they need in order to engage with each other in the most productive ways. So, we just got off the phone with a huge beverage company, and a very, very senior leader there was telling us about, in his organization, empowering some of the women leaders in particular who didn't feel like they had the license to own a problem, and really giving them project management skills, helping them develop some communication skills so that they had the voice to raise issues and engage in the problem solving, and really drive home some of the creativity that they could bring into some of that solutioning space. It was really a question of initially they didn't have the confidence or the capabilities that they needed. And that, when those are lacking at the kind of grassroots level, it's hard to get people to engage. So I would ask, all the leaders in today's call to kind of step back and do that more, scientific investigation of where the barriers are, because there are also, through that process, emergent hidden gems, places where collaboration is working brilliantly. And then you can find what's already working and decide how to replicate that across the organization for even more power.
Great. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Heidi. Any question from the audience? Any raised hands? Otherwise, I'm just going to take the space and ask you a question, Heidi. Right. So, because I found a lot of times in my own experience that often, as you say very well, the leaders have, fantastic collaboration network because they've done it over the years. So it's true that they don't necessarily understand where the barriers are, but they try often. It's like, there are things like breakfast meetings or whatever, there's a kind of necessary, they understand the necessity and they try. On the young ones, the ones I had at the Innovation Network from across the board, thousands of people, they understand it. They just kind of go for it. But I find the barriers are often in the middle, often in the middle management, right? Where, because they have the pressure and they have the pressure and the requirement to deliver, and then they have this kind of threat, or they're not safe and secure in their position. So how do you tackle this middle management, kind of lack of willingness, for want of a better description?
Absolutely. Spot on. We identified that middle manager crunch where they're getting the performance demands from the top and the needs of the employees from the bottom. And so again, happy to put that, I'll put that link to an article that I wrote with my co-author, Mark Mortensen, about how to drive an empathy culture that really produces higher performance. And so in that, I know we're at the top of the hour, so I would just drop in a couple of ideas, but making sure people understand that there is no tension between empathy and performance. Indeed, they are kind of a machine that once you get it running is significantly more powerful than trying to keep those different worlds separated. And so I think it's absolutely crucial that people understand how knowing their people, taking this personalized approach, what motivates people, and at least trying to meet them where they're at is highly empathetic.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I absolutely, very much so. Empathy, yeah, such an important word in corporate culture, which is lacking often. Yeah, there's another question in the chat here. So, can you read the question, or shall I just?
The 9-zaggers. Yeah, what do we do about those 9-zaggers? The naysayers. And I think that's absolutely vital for us to do two things. When you have somebody who comes across as a blocker, trying to dig into what's going on here. First of all, is there a legitimate content or substantive reason why they're saying no? Because maybe this is the person who sees those risks when you don't. And it's really vital that you embrace what they're saying, because they could be saying no for exactly the right reason. So the first branch I have in my decision tree is whether there's a substantive reason, valid reason for them objecting. And to understand that, asking them, help me understand what's going on. Why do you think this is such a bad idea? Where, right? So engaging them and helping them express what it is that they feel so negative about. If indeed there is not a substantive reason, and this becomes more on the interpersonal side, then digging into the whys there. Is it that they weren't part of the generation of this idea, and therefore they're afraid of what happens if it gets implemented and they weren't part of the originating idea? Maybe they just feel left out. Maybe they don't see the value in it. Maybe they are, scared, of what would happen. And so I think it's incumbent on a manager first to try to understand where the naysayers are coming from and the source of their concern. Is it substantive, or is it more personal? And then I think, between being, of German descent and having lived in New York, I'm a pretty direct kind of person a lot of times. And so for me, transparency really matters. Calling out to the person, I'm hearing you rejecting this idea, and I get the sense that you're feeling pretty negative about this whole direction. What's going on here? Let's get to the bottom of it. There are people I know who come across as real naysayers who don't understand that. They're just completely unself-aware and have no idea that that's the role that they have crafted for themselves. They don't see other people's perspectives on this. And so calling out that they're coming across in this way, you have to do it with some sensitivity and respect, but it can be a powerful eye-opener for people to help them understand how they can be observed as more constructive and productive. So I would, first start with that empathy and curiosity, and then provide some feedback can be really helpful.
Great, great. I think it's, people seem to be staying on, so we can take additional questions. But I'll hand it over to you, Karen, to maybe close the session here, or maybe if you want to lead on to other questions.
Perfect. Thank you both for such a wonderful discussion. And what we can do is we can keep this discussion alive. So throughout the innovation series, we are posting resources. We are posting links in our discussion forum. We have an area that we have called resources for the innovation series. So if anybody here has something that they want to share with the group, please do so, and I will post that in our discussion forum, or you can feel free to do the same. And Heidi, I'll post your links that you suggested in the chat, or you can share those with me after the event. So thanks for joining the entire event, and it was a wonderful discussion. We hoped you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you soon.